I forgot actually to thank Prof. Zaliha, our leader and our teacher and my friend. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak in this conference. Actually, my presentation is about gender equity and education in Islam, an analytical study. This presentation actually is a part of a paper that was written with the collaboration with my colleague, Dr. Tahrawi Ramdan, who is also an assistant professor at the College of Education. And I'm going, inshallah, to present few parts of our paper. So I was planning to speak for 30 minutes, but when Prof. Daniel said that 20 minutes, you broke my heart.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
So I'm going to present in the same speed I used to present in other conferences. You know, usually struggle with time in order to finish and cover all the points. Besides my presentation, I don't want to assess it by myself, but I tried to incorporate all the objectives of the conference, highlight the issue, the causes, and also draw the way forward and propose the solutions. And hopefully, inshallah, I can do this within the given time. Okay. In Muslim societies, the issue of tradition versus modernism, men versus women, we versus them, or the believers versus the infidels, seem to be complex, unsettled. The debate over them was always emotionally charged, meaning that when we talk about them, we talk from a subjective point. What do we believe in? Okay, so sometimes we lack rationality in our explanation or in our debates over these issues. Why? Because we always start from the point of view of a believer. Okay, so classic topics related to gender debates are those related to marriage, wilaya. Do you know how to move these pictures from the screen? Or I cannot see the full screen. Huh? Okay, let me go back. Okay, and maybe, okay, there. Okay, let me present now. Still the same thing, huh? Okay, anyway, so issues related to marriage, wilaya in nikah, inheritance distribution, guardianship qiwama, testimonial statement in court shahada, religious leadership, imama, the obligatory presence of next of kin in traveling, mahram, honor crimes, and the provision of education for women are always in debate. And this is what we were doing for 2 days. Actually, we are talking about men and women, equality, equity. So we are still unsettled. We didn't settle these issues yet. And we cannot progress, we cannot develop unless we settle all our ideological ideas. We cannot proceed with economic development while we are still fighting over ideology, like what is happening in some of Muslim countries and Arab countries. So in relation to education, Islam called all believers to seek knowledge. There is no discrimination, there is no division, there is no appointment by gender. You are supposed to learn, you are not supposed to learn. So both male and female, men and women are asked to learn and seek knowledge. Okay, but however, segregation between the two genders was and still rampant in many Muslim countries. So we are wondering what happened. Do we have problem with understanding the text? Was the mistake in the historical practices? Where did we lose our track? Okay, so reliable evidence from historical sources demonstrate that Muslim women have been consistently put aside with regard to obtaining equal opportunities for learning as compared to men. And here I would like to actually give a different opposing narrative from Dr. Ismat Ramzi when he talked about medieval Islam, and he mentioned that actually is the feminist interpretation of our history and all that. Actually, the history itself kept silence over certain issues related to women. And I will come back, inshallah, to this issue later on. So the objective of this study is to highlight the Islamic discourse vis-a-vis gender equity in education, to shed light on potentialities for empowering Muslim women via personalized educational packages. And here comes the difference between equality and equity. Okay, and it seems that we have again to revisit the meaning of equity. So I will go back to it, inshallah, by explaining the meaning of equity in education. What do we mean by equity? Okay, so to shed light on potentialities for empowering Muslim women via personalized educational packages, which observe her natural dispositions or the fitra, التي خلقها الله عليها, the fitra that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created women with, okay, without bias and discrimination. So when we say that women are different from men or men are different from women, we mean the difference only. We don't mean any sort of classification that this one is better than the other. Okay, so there is no such thing as classification, but there are differences. We cannot deny that there are differences. Okay, the methodology of the study actually was a systematic review, related literature, previous studies, and reports was it utilized. And then after that, a reflective analytical account of the meaning of gender equity in education from an Islamic perspective, and the actual educational practices, challenges, and the way forward were presented. So, and then the implication. We expect that, inshallah, by this work, we can contribute in clarifying and developing a concept of gender equity in education from an Islamic perspective, compatible to the 21st century educational requirements and standards. Not revisiting the history and we stop there, not borrowing literally from our Islamic heritage and we go for self-glorification and showing the incorrectness of the other so that we show that we are good. No, it doesn't work. So we have really to sort out, look for a real way and a roadmap, as they say, if we really want to make a change, a real change in our society. Okay, so what we meant by this, a new, maybe it's not new, maybe it's old, but we didn't know it before, meaning of gender equity in education from an Islamic perspective, far away from the two extreme sides. The feminist expose, talking about literal mechanical equality, and also from the Islamic orthodox or the extreme views in Islam, which segregate women and think that her place is supposed to be at home, giving birth, producing human beings, and giving them food and education. And we wonder how is she going to do it without having education in the first place. Okay, so going back or revisiting equity again, I don't know how many times now, maybe around more than 10 times so far. Within these 2 days, people were talking about equity and equality. So let me just make it simple, and inshallah, it will be the last time you hear about these two concepts, at least for today. Yeah. So while equality means each individual or group of people is given the same resources or opportunities, regardless of his or her internal dispositions and external circumstances. Okay, equity recognizes that every individual has different circumstances, endowed with different abilities, and lives a different reality. Therefore, he or she learns in a different way. So equity here look at applying fairness, but according to the dispositions, abilities, and the needs of these people or groups. So building on these differences, allocating the exact resources and opportunities should be in the same, in the sake of catering for these differences and must reach an equal outcome. Okay, again, people, they are used to these examples of the apples and the boxes, those boys watching a football match, and they cannot reach, they cannot see because they have different sizes. So do we give them the same number of boxes so that they climb on and can see the match, or we give them different according to their size? So let me give another example. If we have two people, two ladies, me and my sister, we are not of the same height and we want to buy some material to make a dress. So for myself, I need 2 meters, but for my sister, she needs 1 meter only because she is very short maybe. So this is equity. The fairness is there, okay? The equality in the outcome is there, that both of us are going to have dresses for Eid, but the means of distribution is different according to my needs and her needs. So this is equity. So in conclusion, equity in education means providing learners regardless of their SES, the socioeconomic status, race, or gender, an equal opportunity to learn according to their individual dispositions and interests, and making sure that student has the support they need to be successful. So the outcome should be the same, while we are catering for the individualized needs of these learners. So this is equity in education. So it is believed that equity in education has two dimensions: fairness, which implies ensuring that personal and social circumstances, as I explained earlier, should not be obstacles to achieving educational potential, rather reinforcing elements. So we cannot say that, oh, women cannot study engineering because naturally they are not equipped with what it takes to study engineering. Therefore, it is an area reserved for men. This is completely wrong. So fairness here is giving the chance to all, women and men, and then the best one will make a good engineer at the end. But how we teach them engineering, this is the dilemma, this is the problem. Because educational studies also are telling us that boys and girls learn differently. And yet we are still implementing the same curriculum in our schools. We are teaching the girls and boys the same thing with the same methodology, same textbooks. Okay? The number two, inclusion, which implies ensuring a basic minimum standards of education for all. For example, that everyone should be able to read, write, and do simple arithmetic. Also, it means that all are given the same opportunity to embark in any field of study without prejudices. This is what I have explained by this example of engineering. So these two dimensions are closely intertwined and can help to tackle school failure besides overcoming the effects of social deprivation on schooling. Now, as I said, I tried actually to comply with all the objectives of the conference by talking about the theoretical foundation of equality and equity. And in this regard, actually, I have chosen or I have selected 3 plus the Islamic point of view, so the total of 4. The first one is the functionalist paradigm. Number 2 is the Marxist or the conflict paradigm. Number 3, the feminist paradigm, and then the Islamic point of view or the Islamic perspective. Okay, so these theoretical or these theories, actually, all of them, they tried to answer the following questions. Do schools reinforce inequality? Are schools meritocratic institutions where students' performance depends primarily on motivation and abilities? Is it more accurate to see schools as actively reinforcing inequalities of class, race, in and over, sorry, I cannot see the words, huh? So it means here explicitly or implicitly, openly or covertly discriminating against students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Do schools merely respond in neutral or objective fashion to the differences that students exhibit or take with them to the school, or do they play a part in magnifying them? They highlight more these differences or maybe creating these differences. So let us see what our theories are saying. So start from the functionalist paradigm. This is well known in sociology in general, sociology of education. It goes back to the founder, the French sociologist Émile Durkheim, and all those who actually worked in his tradition. So they look at education as one social institution that is working in a social system. Okay. Because in the functionalist theory, society is made out of systems, okay, agencies, institutions. All these institutions, they actually do play a role, and at the same time serving others to survive for the objective of stability, cohesion in the society. So for them, education is one institution among these many. So when students join the school, they come with different levels of academic ability and experience, different levels of parental encouragement, They tend to make friends among students with similar ability of a similar socioeconomic status. And in time, these friends influence their achievements and educational plans. So here, the school is not responsible for any sort of inequality according to this functionalist paradigm. So education is, in fact, of a meritocratic, meaning that by merit. Okay, students, they perform in schools or any educational institution by merit. It promotes common values to create cohesion, unity, and stability. Male or female's educational attainment is purely meritocratic. So there is no discrimination between male or female, between those who belong to upper classes or lower classes or middle classes. So it's all based on merits. Now let us see the troublemaker theory, or the Marxist or the conflict paradigm. And this theory goes back, of course, to Karl Marx. I think everybody here knows him. Okay, so let me just summarize the ideas of this paradigm. As we know that the Marxist theory is based on the idea of conflict. Okay, the idea of conflict and the history of mankind, according to Karl Marx, is a history of conflict. People, they involved in conflicts for two things: for power and wealth. And Karl Marx was giving us a lot of examples. You go back and visit the human history and you will find it happening at the level of individuals or states. It's something that is known in the human history, that there is always conflict over these two. So society is an arena for conflict, according to them. Therefore, the educational institutions are a reflection of this society. They are also an arena of conflict. But Karl Marx, or the Marxists and those who worked in his tradition, or the conflict paradigm, they don't emphasize on the difference between the genders, but they differentiate between those who belong to upper classes and to lower classes, and how the schools are actually working in favor of those who come from upper classes. Of course, later on, the feminists are coming to that, and some of them actually, they are Marxist. They emphasized, or they reflected these differences or this inequality on the genders. Okay, so according to them, the educational institutions are arenas for conflict. Okay, and then that any academic performance of male and female is actually based on their social class affiliation, from where they come. Education is part of the ideological state apparatus and promotes ruling class values at the expense of other classes. The concept of academic ability and its measurement is highly doubted. There are skeptics when it comes to this. The nature of academic curriculum is essentially alien to lower class youth, male and female both. And then teachers tend to be consciously or unconsciously biased in favor of students who come from upper classes. And then they give examples also of certain practices in the educational institutions, such as ability tracking or ability groups. And I think it is practiced in some Malaysian schools here. So the Marxist paradigm bitterly criticized this system, and because they explain that a student's academic attainment is determined by their social class affiliation. Those who eat well, sleep well, living in comfortable homes, receive support from the family, receive extra educational help outside, normally they perform better than those who come from lower classes. So if we do this ability tracking in early age, for example, in primary, grade 2, when students reach grade 2, after they finish grade 1, then some schools, what they do, they actually divide the students according to their performance, especially in what is called important school subjects. Students in groups, group bija, the clever ones, the fast learners, and the not so bija, or those who are slow learners. And of course, there are many, many negative outcomes for this: the social stigma, the performance, the quality of the teachers who are teaching these different groups. So the Marxist paradigm is criticizing this mechanism of dividing the students into ability tracks or ability groups, and it criticized it with the fact that it is actually working in favor of those who come from upper classes. The feminist paradigm, and I think many people now are talking about feminism, feminist, too many things have been said about them. So I try to summarize their ideas. So education is an agent of secondary socialization that helps to enforce patriarchy. The first one is actually held at the level of the family, as Dr. Haslinda has explained. The second socialization that is working in favor of this patriarchy society is taking place in the school, according to the feminist paradigm. The educational system is always working in favor of males, okay? In favor of males. And then traditional gender roles, which reinforce and justify male dominance again. The so-called natural differences between men and women are not true, okay? That's why feminists are actually criticized for the idea of this literal and mechanical equality between the sexes, as they call them, not the gender, because the gender is the society's understanding of the roles of these two sexes. Therefore, there was a call for a literal and mechanical equality between both sexes. My remark here is that the irony in this regard, whether we are with them or we are against them, is that the equality is enshrined in the concept of a male model, and that women have to assimilate too. So, unconsciously, while we are defending women to make them equal to men, we created a model, and this model, actually, this perfect model is the male, and women, we have to strive in order to reach that model, and we do what they do. So this is my own interpretation of their claims. Okay, now the Islamic perspective on education. In Islam, the authentic text of Islam education is not an exclusive right for one gender. This one is clear, there is no doubt. Okay? For one gender or social class or one privileged political, social, economic, religious, or cultural elite. Actually, if we study the history of the Islamic educational institutions, you will find that poor people are the first ones to receive kutabs. The kutab, the first kutabs, they were actually established to teach the boys who come from poor families or the orphans. This is another evidence that Islam actually doesn't segregate between the social classes. Okay? The text itself in the Quran, what the Prophet said about seeking knowledge, it's a call for all to learn, regardless of the social status, economic, religious, political, or the gender. So the result is that learning is a right for all and should be in line with the maxims of the Sharia, of course. Okay, so learning should be held in an environment of harmony with no conflict. We are not here to fight with men. Why we have to fight with them? Men are our brothers. They are our husbands. They are our fathers, our neighbors, our colleagues. And with men and women together, we can create a strong ummah. There is no doubt in that. So our approach is men and women work together. وَجَعَلْنَا بَيْنَهُمَا مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. Even in zawaj, even in marriage. So the concept of the mawadda and rahmah should be there, in addition to respect. Okay, so let me move on. Now the FUPA in Muslim educations, Muslim women's education. What went wrong? Okay, the text is clear. All are called to study, all are called to seek knowledge. So what went wrong? Okay, so the first type, the FUPA related to the image that was created about Muslim women from Orientalists, travelers. Okay, what did they say about Muslim women? They are always in favor of describing the Orient. And when they use the Orient, they are in reference to Muslim countries in a very fascinating, magical image that is not realistic most of the time. Okay, so sexism, as in the tales about the harem and the concubines, symboling exotic beauty and seduction, faces of entertainment such as singers and dancers, symboling householders and domestic workers. You can refer to these Orientalist narratives, some of them, of course, not all, We cannot generalize their tales and their stories and their essays, what they wrote about Muslim women. You can refer even to the Persian miniatures, you know, the drawing, the munamnamat in Arabic, we call it. And women are always depicted in sexual positions, half naked, showing the beauty of the body. Okay, and then other forms of artworks as well, even in modern age. I think all of you know about the French painter who painted Les Dames d'Alger, my country, from Algeria, the ladies of Algiers, in the hammam, in the Turkish bath. So they have this fascination about the exotic beauty, maybe, okay, sex object. So this picture was depicted and stayed for a long time. Okay, so less or no indication of serious role women played in the public affairs sector through many examples. Okay, so so there is no mention of women, very few, who played a role in the public affairs, who played actually a serious role, far away from being a dancer or being a harim or being a singer. Okay, although we have many great women known in history, so we just have to discover them and revisit their history again one more time, like Fatima al-Fihriya, Walada bint al-Mustakfi, the poet in Andalusia. Okay, Shajarat al-Dur, the queen of Egypt. Arwa al-Sulayhiya, the queen of Yemen, the one she ruled the Ismailis. When they ran away from it, when the Fatimid dynasty collapsed in Egypt, they ran away to Yemen, and she was their queen actually in medieval Islam. Okay, so little mention of contribution of the field in the field of knowledge, religious sphere, administration, or military. We have to look, we have to dig into the history of Islam to find these figures. Sometimes they are not known to us, those who are in academia. What about the layman or ordinary people outside? Okay, the second aspect of this FUPA in Muslim women's education related to the practices. Although Islam attaches great value to education and prescribed it as a duty of women as well as of men to acquire knowledge in order to develop their faculties to become good believers, okay, and to become good individuals to build this Muslim society, historical practices throughout the Islamic history tell otherwise. Okay, and here I would like to go back to the example to answer Dr. Ismail. Actually, when I was conducting research about medieval Islam education, a comparative study between the Ayyubites and the Fatimites of Egypt, we used Al-Maqrizi, and I think it's a known Egyptian historian who lived in the 14th century, and he is actually considered as an authority in this. There is nothing mentioned about education for women except few sentences here and there that some ladies in the castle, they used to have their own private teachers who go to them and teach them. However, there is a long narrative and very long exposés about schools for men, fields of knowledge, students, even talking thoroughly about the madrasas. After the establishment of Al-Madrasa al-Nidamiyya in Iraq, the style was duplicated in Egypt. So the madrasas, they were actually exclusively for men. There is nothing mentioned about women. He talked about the Khanqa for the Sufis. There is not a single news about women. He talked about the Maristans, the medical studies universities, as we call them today, or the hospitals. There is nothing mentioned about women. He talked about the ribats, where the people learn the art of military. There is nothing mentioned about women. So I'm very sorry when I say this, but there is no, attention given to Muslim education history, whether it exists or not. Okay. So why I think there is a problem actually, I think strongly that there is a complicity of the lawmakers and the fuqaha and the customary practices, the urf. There is a marriage between the urf and the sharia in certain places in Muslim countries. What the Islamic understanding of the role of women in Afghanistan compared to the role of women in Malaysia or in Algeria or in Tunisia is completely different because of the urf that is, or the tradition that is known to that place or practiced in that place. So I believe that there is a strong marriage. Sometimes the fuqaha, they just keep quiet over this, okay? And then...
Dr. Souad, I've given you half an hour if you check your
really?
watch.
I didn't even reach half, you know?
So
okay.
Can you please
okay, I will go straight away to the problem.
Thank
you. Let me finish this one. And then also there is a marginalization of women's education due to the dominance of some tribal, feudal, and patriarchal values. No denial of this. Whether you are a woman or a man, you go back, study sociology of the Islamic or Muslim societies, and you will find all this. Okay, the present states of Muslim women, although Muslim women made great advances in the field of education, still many or millions of Muslim women around the world are still lagging behind. And the statistics, you can open now, all of you, you Google, you will find many statistics there telling about the miserable situation of education provision for women, either in the attainment, meaning that to get access to education in the first place, or retention, staying until graduation, or continue to study. So we have this problem, okay? There's some statistics, you can maybe refer to them later on when the material is shared, okay? The current challenges. There are many challenges hindering education provision for Muslim women. We have poverty, the mother of all illnesses. We know that most or many, actually not most, many Muslim countries are poor countries. And they cannot actually, or they don't have the means to provide proper education for all, let alone for girls, okay? And no enforcement of compulsory education. Yes, it is compulsory by the law, but the government, they just close their eyes on it. In Pakistan, for example, in Afghanistan, in some rural places in Algeria, in some rural places in Tunisia, that is known as a model for progress in the Arab world. Still, girls, they cannot attend school. Okay, child or female labor and marriage, gender role, and the social position of girls in the family. And I think Dr. Haslinda has already highlighted this, that from beginning we know already, they will tell you in Algeria, oh, never mind, you will end up in the house of your husband at the end, whether you study or you don't study. I think now things are starting to change, but my time when I was young, this is the narrative inside many families in Algeria. Gender role and cultural disvaluing of girls' education. They don't value girls' education compared to the boys' education, especially poor families where the tribal norms are dominating. They think that to educate the boy is a good investment because the boy will stay within the family. However, to invest in a girl's education, this investment, the outcome of it will go to another man because this girl will marry another man and leave the family. Okay? Then, economic survival priorities, insecurity in some places, like girls are targeted, okay? They are exposed to repeated physical and emotional abuse, rapes, acid attacks, like what is happening in Bangladesh, for example. Lack of hygiene and sanitation in educational institutions, believe it or not. There are many educational institutions are still suffering from this. In Africa, for example, some girls, when they reach puberty, they stop going to school. They don't know what to do. If they go to school, there are no facilities for them. And then distance-related and accommodation challenges, especially in rural places. Okay, and the last one, armed conflicts. And we know that women and children are the most vulnerable parties in any armed conflict. And currently, I'm working actually on education for refugees. I'm leading a flagship program in my kulliyah, and we have conducted a study about the status of women in the camps in Turkey, the Syrian women. There are like atrocities taking place there. Okay, the way forward now. Let me just summarize. I believe that لا يغير الله ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. We cannot change unless we change ourselves. So I believe that the development has to start from the human being themselves. Okay, so this is the summary of what is written here. Then the way forward. Okay, So the way forward actually to implement gender equity in education that benefits Muslim women. A brave, and I put it in bold here, capital letters, a brave critical review of the religio-cultural values which were used to maneuver women is crucially needed. We need to have that. We are still, even now, among us, as people who belong to academia, we don't share a common stand when it comes to this. We don't share a common stand. We cannot lie to each other. We come from different understanding, different schools of thought, and we keep on arguing over ideology, and we forget the problems on the ground. Okay? New and clear religious decrees or fatawi. And this morning, actually, one of our presenters, Prof. Bakar, he actually said you cannot generalize, and he said, I don't accept this question. Actually, again, maybe I can go against him also. We have to come up with a consensus. We cannot leave the fatwa to anyone. And this consensus has to be studied by prominent figures in the Muslim Ummah. So me as Souad or Dr. Haslinda or the Prof. Imtiaz, we cannot, each one of us will come up with his fatwa. Okay? And then a paradigm shift should be attained among both scholars, including educated elites and the average individuals. And I think Dr. Haslinda is smiling there. She agrees with me. Yeah, we need to change the way we look at this issue. And then after that, new policies must be designed and an action plan should be implemented at the level of educational institutions. Now I have the details of the way forward. Okay? So a paradigm shift and how we change this mentality. It has to be done at the level of all societal agencies. Society must change. Okay? The way we look at girls. And of course, this can be done by all when we play our role, whether the media or the schools or religious institutions, families, individuals, GOs, NGOs, governments, all we have to put hand in hand in order to make this effort. And of course, it won't come within 24 hours or 2 days or 1 week or 1 year. It's a process that can show its fruits in the long run. Okay, instead of depriving women of education, with the pretext that they are vulnerable in some places, they cannot protect themselves, they will be subject to rape, or let us solve these problems. We cannot solve this problem by putting girls and lock them down inside homes. Okay, so all active institutions in the society should help eliminate discriminatory gender norms, okay, and harmful practices that deny girls access to education. Removal of gender bias among teachers themselves in schools, and most importantly, a clear understanding, philosophy and plans should be drawn far from the extremist or orthodox Islamic readings and feminist rhetoric that is based on conflict between all sexes. Then number 2. So
you have taken 40 minutes, by the way.
Okay, let me just summarize this last 2, okay? Okay. يَزَعُ اللَّهُ بِالسُّلْطَانِ مَا لَا يَزَعُ بِالْقُرْآنِ. Sometimes the change can come by forcing people to do things, better than asking them for hidayah or to convince them. So that's why laws, they play a major role in making this paradigm shift and in changing the situation. So the provision of education for all, enforcement of compulsory girls' education, the law must set concrete target for more equity, okay? And then special educational policies has to be designed. And the last part, yeah, this is also related to laws, okay? One important point here, involving more women in policy making. How come you are deciding on my behalf? We are designing educational packages for girls, and sometimes the committee that is working on it are all male. They are looking at it from their own perspective. So we need women to be more involved in this. Okay, maybe later on you can read all this. Okay, now in education itself, what can we do in education? Because education is an agent of change. Okay, so learning activities should be held in physical and psychological safe environment. Girls should be treated without prejudices or discrimination. They should be supported in the subject and careers they choose to pursue, including those in which they are often underrepresented. schools should limit early tracking. I explained already the tracking. And then the link between school and home should be strengthened. You can see Prof. Daniel there is smiling. Okay, the last part, I think. Okay, this is very important, Prof. Daniel. Gender responsive pedagogy. Unfortunately, we are teaching both girls and boys the same content, the same textbooks, using the same pedagogies, which is completely wrong. Even when we segregate between boys and girls in schools. You know, in America, they started to do this starting from 2006 because they realized that they learn differently. But for us, we segregate between them based on certain ethical values. We don't want them to mix. So when they go to class, they study the same curriculum using the same pedagogy. So what's the use of that? Okay, and then identifying and providing systematic help to those who fall behind at school and reduce your repetition. Okay, yeah, another point, the curriculum itself has to be changed. Gender-sensitive curriculum is needed, and school through the curriculum and hidden curriculum should play a role in empowering thoughts. This is very important. How we think about ourselves as women or girls are very important. The schools, they have to empower girls' thoughts in order to make a change. And this change, actually, the fruits of it are not going to be for women only. They are going to be reflected on the whole society. And then the conclusion is that there is no doubt that well-educated girls are more likely to lead healthy, productive lives, okay, generate higher income, participate in the decision that most affect them, and build a better future for them and their families. Girls' education strengthens economies and reduces inequality. Okay, that's why we need, at the end, efforts to provide an equitable education based on balance and justice. Thank you very much, Prof. Daniel, for your generosity. And I know you are forced to wait for me. Thank you very much.